Today we're going to talk about macro versus micronutrients. What are they and how do they affect your athletic performance?
Yeah.
We got Robbie here.
Hi, friends.
And Robbie, you are actually a sports nutrition coach.
That's correct.
And tell us a little bit how you go about doing that with people.
Well, I go through steps. Very, very small steps to begin. First step, all we're trying to do is just document what you're doing.
Yeah.
So first step is just tracking small details. How much water you drink, how much sleep you get. And then we eventually progress to where we're looking at your food. If you can track your food, then we can start to look at how many calories you're eating. And then ultimately we can get to your nutrients. And that's gonna be the focus of everything. What are your macronutrients? What are your micronutrients?
And if people want to go through that program and work with you, how do they reach out?
Easiest way is Instagram.
Nice.
I love Instagram. I'm an Instagram guy. My handle is 3 Boys and Dad. 3 Boys and Dad. I'll even write it up here for you. 3 Boys and Dad is how you can reach me on Instagram.
How I first got into macronutrition was doing Robbie's program. We're about 18 months in at this point.
Yeah.
And
we've had good progress.
Yeah, and it's an
We've had
amazing
great
program. I
progress.
lost about 30 to 35 pounds in 90 days using this as kind of the backdrop of, or the foundation of that. Obviously I had to combine it with movement and accountability, but really tracking and really getting a handle for my macronutrients. Well, what are macronutrients?
Well, let's just break down the words. Macro, big. Micro, small. Very simple. What I've learned over the years is many people like to major in the minors. And what that means is you focus so much on these small, tiny details that you get lost in all of it. Mm-hmm. What we like to do is focus right now. I'll tell you this. They're both beneficial. They're both beneficial. But this is where we should always start as your macros. Those are your big 3. Traditionally, your macronutrients are going to be 3 big things. 1 is your protein, 2 is your fat, and then 3 is going to be your carbs. But one thing that's being added in, and actually you track as well.
I do track it.
Yeah. One of those macronutrients is your alcohol as well, which we should call it ethanol, but it is alcohol. That's what we all refer to it as, is alcohol, but in essence it is ethanol. But looking at these 4 and really focusing on these as opposed to your micronutrients, which are going to be micronutrients are going to be your minerals, your vitamins, sugars. So typically what most people do when they go to the doctor is going to say like, hey, your sodium level's too high. So your goal immediately becomes eliminating sodium. And when you focus on that, all you're doing is looking at this one tiny, minuscule aspect of the big picture. Now that doesn't mean, and you listen to your doctor, we're not trying to tell you don't listen to your doctor, but ultimately when you're only focusing on that one tiny detail, you're only impacting your health in that one small way. Now what we want to do is look at big things that affect everything we do. And typically when you start looking at these big 4, well, these fall into line, typically. So what we like to do is we like to look at the big 4, the big 3 or the big 4, manage these. If you can effectively take control of these right here, then we would like to move on to the next step, which is starting to look at your smaller micronutrients.
And the reason why we look at alcohol as its own macro is because sadly in today's day and age, there really isn't any nutritious benefit of alcohol. So alcohol is actually going to have a lot of carbs, but they're empty carbs, they're empty calories. So alcohol is just eating up your caloric intake. It's really eating up what you could be getting in your other 3 macros.
Yes. I would almost say that the most important, like if alcohol is in your diet, I would almost say the most important thing you can do is manage this guy here. If you can just get this guy right here managed, it's going to have such a significant effect on the other three, and it's going to hit these as well.
It's just going to open up calories for you to get more of the macros that count and the micros that count. Also, it's going to manage your sugar.
Yeah.
You know, you take alcohol out, you're going to manage your sugar. I personally was able to lose up to 5 pounds by just taking alcohol out of my diet.
Oh, yeah.
Time. You take alcohol out, I mean, think about it. A beer, if you're drinking a light beer, you know, is going to be at least 100 calories.
100 calories.
But I don't know
and that's a light.
Yeah, but I don't know about you. I love IPAs.
Yeah,
and IPAs are 300 calories.
Easily.
Yeah. And for me, for my age and height, my typical burn for the day is somewhere around 1,700 or 1,800 calories if I don't work out. So if I have one beer, I only have 1,500 calories left to get all of this in.
Yeah, that's 1/6.
It's crazy.
I'm not good at math. I'm pretty good at lifting things and putting things out, but math isn't a great thing of mine. But what is that, like 17, 18%?
It's crazy.
From one drink.
I've wasted it on this macro when in America, we have a challenge with getting enough of this macro.
Yeah.
We have a big challenge in America of having enough protein.
I would say it's an epidemic, in my opinion. I train, you know, at any given week between, you know, 150 and 300 people on any given week. And I can say most people that I work with are deficient in protein. And if you can just get this guy here, if you can get your protein up, it's going to have a severe effect on everything else that you do.
Yeah. If you're going to start with one item on the board, Robbie already said, don't
major in the minors.
So focus on your macros. Well, if there's one macro, if this is too complicated for you, if there's one macro that you can focus on right away, well, it's cutting alcohol out.
Yeah.
If there's another one, though, it's focus on protein.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, because this gets so overwhelming when you're trying to pay attention to everything in your life. When you're looking at your nutrition and your food intake, it's overwhelming. There's so much going on. If you can just look at one of them and just take your protein, this affects everything that you do.
It really does.
Protein
These other fall in the line.
Protein's going to cure your hunger. You're hungry, eat protein. That's going to cure the hunger that you're feeling. And number two, what it's going to do is it's going to cut into your fat and your carbs. Now, most Americans are very heavy on the carbs. Yeah. That's what
I was here before I started tracking my calories and
those are the big ones.
And seeing the macro breakdown. I was probably getting, I don't know, 80 to 100 grams of protein a day when I first started tracking.
Oh,
wow. At that point, I weighed 185 pounds. So I was super deficient, especially because I work out so much. For me, I shoot to have a 1-to-1 ratio because
it's the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, we're breaking down muscle.
Yeah, so, and we'll talk about that. The reason that protein is so important to your body, not just because it's going to help satiate you and it's going to cut into the other ones that you don't want. The more protein that you eat, the less hunger that you're going to have for alcohol, carbs, and fat. But ultimately, the reason that you want protein is because that's what bonds with your muscles. So resistance training is ultimately very important in what you're doing, breaking down your muscles. You rip them apart, your muscles heal. And protein is what allows you to heal your muscles, which allows you to burn body fat at a significantly higher rate as opposed to just starving yourself.
Yeah.
You're just starving yourself. All you're doing is you're shedding weight, but you're not really losing body fat, you're losing muscle mass. If you can build muscle and focus on protein, you're gonna burn body fat at a very high rate. So that's why I believe in this, macros versus micros, well, they're both very important. If your doctor tells you need to eliminate your sodium, your sugar, well, you better take care of that. You better listen to your doctor and you better go take care of those. So they are important, but we can effectively manage these easier by focusing on the big 3 or 4.
It's so true. Now, when it comes to athletic performance, it really depends on what your athletic goals are. So for me, in this season of my life, am a ultra endurance athlete, specifically running. At one point, about 5-10 years ago, I was an ultra endurance athlete, but specifically long distance biking and mountain biking. Well, what I've learned in the past couple of years tracking this, because I didn't track this 10 years ago. I've been tracking this meticulously for the past couple of years with Robbie, and I've experimented in different ways. So when I did my 50-mile race last year, I actually focused heavily on eating protein. Now, there were some pros and cons of this. The biggest pro of me focusing on taking in protein while running is I recovered extremely quickly. My recovery, I was back at a high-intensity interval training yoga sculpt class within 48 hours of completing my 50-miler. Usually it takes people 1 to 2 weeks to recover and do a workout after doing a 50-mile race for the first time. I was doing burpees within 48 hours, and I attribute that to the fact that when I was running, I was taking in protein. So my body broke down, but it rebuilt itself fast. The negative of that is I definitely did not take in enough carbs during my 50-miler. I was lacking on carbs. So what I found is in the later miles, and when I say later miles, like 35 to 40 to 45 miles, I was lacking energy. But it was too late for me to rely on carbs. So I actually had to take in a lot of sugar for the, and I had to keep doing it because I was having a crash. I was crashing, you know. I had to eat every 15 to 20 minutes, every half hour. I had to get sugar in my system fast and keep it going. So I was literally the last 10 or 15 miles of my 50-miler, this is what was fueling me. I wish this is what was fueling me. So this year, when I do my 100-miler, I'm gonna focus on both of these.
Smart.
A lot more.
Smart.
And I'm probably gonna do a little less protein than what I was doing, which is still more than what you're typically told to do. I've done a lot of research on this. Like, it used to be, you need to just carb up, carb load, carb load, carb load. And people say this throughout, if you're training for a marathon, if you're training for anything, you need to just have tons and tons of carbs. Well, I did that and I gained 20 pounds. So I don't necessarily recommend you using being an endurance athlete as a reason or an excuse to just load up on carbs. You still need to get these macros right. Really, if you're an endurance athlete, you can eat somewhere between 300 and 600 grams of carbs a day, depending on how much you're expanding that day. For me, on a typical day, if I'm running 6 or 7 miles in a day, maybe I'm eating 280 to 350 grams of carbs. If I'm running 30 miles in a day, now we're talking closer to the 600 range for carbs. But when I was doing this before, I bet I was way over 600. I was doing it way too much. When I was doing my 50-miler, I was doing a lot of protein and not enough carbs. So this time, I'm gonna up those carbs so that I don't have to rely on sugar to get me through that. But if you're lifting, it looks different.
So it depends on your goals.
And
we'll also tell you this. In my era, I'm an older man. My era growing up, we were against fat. Everything was low fat. That's the key to you shedding weight, is to get rid of fat. There's a reason we need fat in our diet and why we have to focus on getting fat in your diet. Now, there's all sorts of different fats. There's polyunsaturated fats, saturated fats, trans fats. You want good fats in your system, and these ultimately are what allow you to absorb your minerals and vitamins. Most of the vitamins and minerals that you consume throughout the day are fat soluble, which means you need fat in your body to absorb those minerals into your bloodstream to get in and fuel your muscles and your organs and help your body out. Not many of these are water soluble. Now, some of them are, so drinking, you obviously need to hydrate, but you do need to get fat in your diet, and we generally would like you to be around a third of your diet to be fat. But you really don't want to go over a third, you know?
Oh, I start feeling very weird if I have a lot more fat.
Yeah,
like,
it changes
especially
you.
like digestively.
Oh yeah.
You just feel heavier.
Yeah.
From a running perspective, I feel heavier if I'm eating a lot of fat. So yeah, I mean, when I'm not prepping for the final week of a 50-mile training regimen, I'm like a third based on
Yeah.
Robbie's guidance.
And then what about when you're running? When you're preparing?
The carbs will go up to like 40 to 50%.
Yeah, which sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what does your fat dip down to?
It maybe 20%.
Yeah. So it depends on your goals, and it depends on what your level of activity is. But regardless, this should be the focus ultimately, and these fall into this. Now, if you've got these handled and you've got this dialed in, then I would really start focusing on your micronutrients.
And the first micronutrient to focus on is probably sugar.
I would agree with you.
And then sodium. It'd probably be
And then
sugar
sodium.
and then sodium.
Yeah, I agree.
Most likely.
And you already know, if you're watching this, you probably already know what Americans are known for. You know what we're known for.
We have a 42%.
This guy.
Yeah, we have a 42% obesity rate in America, and then a 33% of overweight. So only 25% of Americans are normal at best.
Yeah.
Like normal body weight at best. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and it appears that it's not going to come down. Those numbers are going to go up.
And do you know what the #1 food group in America is?
Well, tell me.
Grain-based desserts
Wow.
is the #1.
I did not know that.
food group in America.
Well, that's not
Grain-based
surprising.
desserts.
Yeah, well, that's not surprising.
Yeah, it's because a lot of people will have a donut or a bagel. Well, bagel doesn't count as a grain-based dessert, but a donut or a muffin for breakfast. And then we eat tons of cookies. I love cookies. Cookies are so good.
Yeah,
But
cookies are good.
it's crazy that is the #1 food group
Yeah.
in America. It should probably not be that.
Well, that's, and if you look at that and with our obesity rates, and they go hand in hand.
I mean, that food group is literally all of this and then these two.
yeah.
And it's
a
the
lot
bad
of
fat.
It's all bad
Right?
fat.
The other benefit of fat is it's really good for the brain.
Yes,
But it's
it
like
is.
the
Yes.
avocados, the fish oils.
Fish oils.
The
You want-
nuts are really good fat for the brain.
I'll tell you an easy
I
way to
can't
think
eat,
about it.
sadly, but it is
Yeah.
what it is. I would die.
Oh my goodness. I'll tell you one of the easiest ways to think about which fat is good for you. Fat that doesn't harden in room temperature. So, think about things like olive oils.
Olive oil, yeah.
Olive oil is a great fat. Fish oil, things that you leave out and it's not going to harden. Things that harden are your pastries. They lard. Things that in room temperature, they just harden up. Very easy to visualize. Those are the things that you don't want to put in your body.
My favorite fat is avocados.
That's one of the best fats.
Hands down, my favorite fat.
Avocados, eat avocados. Yeah, those are a great fat.
I like it so much, I'll probably be allergic within a year. Because I've been eating them like every day. I had guacamole 3 times yesterday.
Well, good for you. Yeah. I might go eat some guacamole after
You
this.
should. It's the
I'm getting hungry for guacamole right now.
And if you want someone to help you get all this dialed in, you got to look up Robbie on Instagram at 3boysandDad.
Yeah, thank you,
and I'll
Johnny.
take you through, how long is the program?
Well, it's an 8-step program. It typically takes about 8 weeks.
Yeah. And then
Some
if you're
people
crazy
are
like us,
4 weeks, 3 weeks, or
you just keep
years.
doing it for years.
I've been doing it, I've been doing it for a long time. Me and you have been sharing information together for close to 2 years now, so yeah.
So it's linked in the description below. We also have a healthy living guide that goes through the 3 pillars of healthy living. And this is part of one of those pillars. But you really need all 3 pillars to live a healthy lifestyle and be a high-performing athlete. So definitely go check that out. And we'll see you in the next video.
Can't wait.